Robert Ampia Kofi here. Thank you, sir. We go back many years, and we're honored to have you. We're honored to have you. I'll kindly ask my two presenters to join, the first Samuel and second Samuel. We go to the senior one, our guru. And so much has been said. I mean, he talked about transgenerational conversations. I try to talk about transgenerational of the Christian faith and where we've come from. Where you sit, how do we create this continuity of our faith, of our practices, of the people God uses in the midst of all the changes? Because there is a discontinuity of time and periods and ages, but there is still always something that must endure and must live through our faith. And how do we make it work?
First of all, the previous session, amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing. Totally amazing. That's a really big question. If I could answer that, but two thoughts come to my mind. Honor and humility from my generation and from the younger generation. I think it is, if my generation honors the younger generation and the younger generation honors me, I think we can have a constructive dialogue and lead to an understanding of each other. Humility says that 18, 19-year-old can teach me. And they can say that I can teach them something. I think we do a disservice when we categorize people. He's a boomer. She's a Zer, Xer. Because as soon as you put a label on somebody, as soon as you define something, you can confine it. Defining, confining come together. So I think it is pejorative to say, because they are not my age group, that they have nothing to offer me. I have much to learn from them. And the same thing for the younger generation. Again, I'm using a broad category to say that we may not think like them, but we're not stupid either. We have paid a price. We've learned a few things and wish we could pass them on. I think one of my biggest regrets in life is that I did not ask my older generation their stories, their histories, where they came from. I was so busy carving out my thing that I did not understand their journey. I think it is behoove every young person in this room or online to look at that person who you think is elder than you, who's your leader, and explore their journey, the price that they have paid. How did they overcome that? How they stayed married to the same person? How they have provided when they didn't have it, how God provided, the testimonies in their life. And I think the same thing has to happen from my generation to the younger generation. Say, tell us about your journey. How are you thinking? What do you think we can do to be stronger, to be better? How can we work together? I think when there's mutual honor and mutual humility that creates the culture of mutual understanding, mutual learning, mutual growth, mutual efforts. Synergy happens when there's humility and honor from both sides. Neither one of them comes naturally.
That's true.
It has to be intentional. We have to say, I honor you. I disagree with you, but I honor you. I disagree with you, but I have much to learn from you. So your question, I don't have an answer to. But how to learn and grow from that, I think if we could create intentionally the culture of honor and humility for all sides of it, I think we can learn and grow together.
Thank you very much. Pastor Sam, a church by its nature is supposed to be transgenerational. Great-grandparents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all in one community. But there is always tension among generations, even with families, parents and their kids and so on. So how do we create this continuum so that one generation doesn't feel I have to set off to go and start something else and not be part of the community that is transgenerational? How do we keep the cohesion of the generations together?
Thank you. Obviously, the ministry of a church has to be multifaceted. And it's got to cater to different generations. It's got to be accommodating. So, as we birth the new generations, some of our churches, when we started, were like 90% or 95% single people. And then you just had this wave, and people were getting married, and then the children were coming. And then you see that the children's church or junior church becomes an important part of the growth of the church because there's biological growth. The first thing is that a church needs to take that children's church seriously. Many churches run it like a place to keep the children busy while the adults do the real church. And I say, in fact, if you're really smart as a pastor, that children's church is probably more vital to the fulfillment of the vision of your church than the adult church, because you have the opportunity of grooming people, right, from childhood. So we found out, for example, in our early years, that there were some people who loved our church but could not stay in our church, and they said it was because of the children's church. So we now realize that many families make their church decisions based on their children. In fact, there's a church not far from ours where the husband and wife, the pastor and his wife, had gone to the US, gone to Bible school, and the wife had specialized on children's ministry. So their children's ministry is world class, and they have classes for each age. We found out some people will go drop their children there, come and attend the service at our end, and then go back to pick their children after the service. So we had to change our junior church completely, okay, and pay attention to these young people. So with that, addressing children is completely different from addressing adults. With that, the ministry is becoming multifaceted. At some point, those people become teenagers. And then you find out you need a teens church or a youth church, and so on. So, and then the first generation, after some time, then they're crossing into 60, 70, 80. That's a different phase of life altogether. I think that a church, while we should have the capacity to bring everybody together, I think we should not treat everybody the same way. that a church should actually make provision for the different phases of life and provide the flexibility to address the unique needs of those generations. The youth, the children's church and the youth church is very important. From our experience, the transitioning, we also need to pay attention to the transitioning. We found out that our youth church, our young people were finding it difficult to transition into the adult church. They did not know where to fit in. You know, okay, so we said, oh, you've exhausted the time you're supposed to be here. You've crossed the limit in terms of age. Move to the adult church, and then they come and they're lost. No, there wasn't a clear pathway for them to cross. We spent hours redesigning the whole process. So now we said, okay, and usually it has to do with where they have the opportunities to serve. Sometimes you don't have any equivalent in the adult church for some of the units and the expressions that they have down there. So one of the things we did, you know, we're talking about this culture of domination. Maybe it's also the monarchical thing, the thing that makes the elder superior to the young person, and the young person is not even hard at all. When young people show up, the people in the adult church don't show them respect. You know? The honor, like he was saying, there's almost no honor. It's like there is disturbance, especially when they come with their new funny ideas. So we now said, okay, it's one church. It's the same church. So the head of the ushering department in the adult church is responsible for all the ushering in the whole church now, in our church.
Okay.
So that means that in the executive committee for ushering in the church, the leaders of the ushering in the youth church and in the children's church, they're a part of the executive committee. So it's not like they are moving completely to a new place they've never been before. The music is the same thing. In fact, sometimes the music director brings some of the worship leaders from the youth church to lead worship on Sunday during the service. So the transition needs to be managed.
Yeah. I think it's a brilliant idea. All of us struggle with that and try to figure out how to make it work. And I think the easiest thing for most churches is to segment. So the youth church is self-contained, children's church is self-contained, adult church is self-contained. There is value in that, but there has to be continuities and there has to be linkages so that the elements there run through each one of us. So, Dr. Chan, part of our charismatic heritage, as I explained, is the personalization. The idea that everybody who has a call must do something on his own. If a Catholic priest or young man has a call, he will never think of going to start the Accra Catholic Church or the Teshi Catholic Church. He would go through an established system. Same with the Anglican, same with the Methodist, almost every denomination except charismatics. Because of our personalization, every time somebody feels something, they feel they must do it by themselves. It has its value, but what it does is that the movement continues to fragment and fragments to the lowest level. How do we create movements, churches, where people can start new things within the old church? People can pioneer new kinds of churches within the old system. So we don't have a one-size-fits-all church model for everybody, but new things can find expression in our churches.
So I've given this some thought. In the charismatic movement, It reminds me of the book of Judges. Everyone did which was right in their sight. Before that, there were the prophets, and now they're the judges. Everyone's doing their own thing. I have difficulty with pastors who don't have a pastor. I have difficulty with pastors who feel a call, and the only way they start another church is to be independent. And that independence, that's another great day today, that independence creates this satellites everywhere, and there's no fidelity, there's no alignment to it. So when I was at the Christian University in Atlanta, and we had hundreds of people going through our program on a regular basis, I always asked them the question, who are you accountable to? Who is somebody who can say no to you? Because if you come to a place where nobody can say no to you, you are naked. And now I know we use the word covering loosely, and I'm not here to semanticize that, except to say that anyone who receives a call from the Lord is not going to be outside the big C church. Mm-hmm. And you have to be, the Bible has so much to say about authority. Jesus said, I really admire that guy because even though he's under authority and has authority, he is under my authority. So he is giving me that whole, so Jesus said, I found more faith in him than all of Israel. It was not because he was a believer, because he understood authority. And I think one of the things we did, our very name Protestant, so we are still protesting everything. Yeah, in November, I was in Wittenberg, Germany. Went to the church, the thesis, and stood in the pulpit and the crypt, so all of that I was just there a few months ago. But we are still protesting everything. So that became part of our DNA. But I think if you're a pastor, you've got to have a pastor. I've always had a pastor. I've always had somebody who was in the spiritual hierarchy over me. I submit myself to my pastor. My pastor knew I'm here. My pastor's praying for me. I am letting him know what's going on. I don't go to a large church. I've been going to the same church since 1989. We have about 300, 350 people. I just determined to stay there. But he's much younger than me. I think he is 49, 50, something like that. I'll report back to him. I'm sending pictures from here. I want him to know that he is my pastor.
So, this system of having a pastor over you sometimes has different application.
Yes.
In different realms, where people think you cannot do anything until I release you. So then instead of becoming, and I like it that you said your pastor is younger than you. Probably you've been saved longer than he's been alive.
Yes, that's true.
So it's not a hierarchical relationship. It's not that he's above you to bring you down. It is a joyful, responsible action of yours to ensure that somebody pays attention to who you are and what you're doing, and can caution you if he needs to caution you.
I understand submission as a voluntary act this way. I submit myself to my pastor. He is my pastor.
Yeah.
And if I understand anything about the Bible, he who has no covering is just running naked.
Yeah.
And during good times, during bad times, during just encouraging times, I have somebody that I'm not looking to as an elder, but I'm looking at a spiritual authority over my life. If he said to me, so I tell him, I'm going to Accra, Ghana, I'm going to be doing this. He says, I'll be praying for you, man. So a pastor who's releasing me, who is behind me, who's celebrating me, he reads my books. He references my stuff. So it's a mutual honor that's going on here. But I think I would say to everybody, you need somebody whom
you are accountable to.
Absolutely.
Very
and it's
much.
not an accountability with a stick.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an accountability with open arms and
Yeah.
celebrating and welcoming. And I want to say something to the older pastors. As an old man, I can talk a little bit like that. Your legacy is not going to be the size of your church. Your legacy is not going to be anything. It's not going to be anything. It's going to be somebody. Your legacy is going to be who you leave behind. So inheritance is what I leave behind. Legacy is who I leave behind.
That's true.
And so who has to be released in your lifetime? I see so many who are doing what they are doing globally because of my investment in my life. I don't own them. They don't report to me. But that's my legacy.
It's the honor and humility you are talking about.
Yes.
That's what produces that
Absolutely.
dynamic relationship of respect that is mutual on both sides. I think we'll be taking a couple of questions from the audience very shortly. But Pastor Sam, I'll come to you before we take any external question. You narrated the conversation you had with the leadership of the Pentecostal Fellowship and the caution that you gave. And sadly, the outcome, which is a result of some of the steps not being taken. In your mind, what was the disconnect? Was it that you didn't communicate well? They didn't hear well? What happened there?
Thank you. I think it was a doctrinal thing, a matter of belief.
Belief, yeah.
Some people, the church has come through phases in our understanding of what the gospel is and how far it should go in influencing people's lives. So I think it was a generational thing. Like, at some point, I realized that most founders of charismatic churches in our sphere are first-generation leaders. So we have big succession issues to deal with. Some of them are beginning to show up now. Maybe after the first generation has roughed it out, then the next generations will learn the lessons and do better. So I think that's what's happening in this issue of the role of the church in national transformation. I think the room that day was divided clearly into two. The older generation did not believe that national transformation is the responsibility of the church. That was it. So, and they made it clear. You guys are talking about national transformation. What national transformation do you want to do more than what we have done? You are abandoning your responsibilities of doing soul winning and church planting. That's what you guys should go and do. And leave all these funny ideas about one national transformation or not. The meeting almost disintegrated, right? But then it was carefully managed with wisdom. Then my generation called another meeting a few weeks later. And when we discussed, we understood ourselves. All of us agreed on the fact that this revival, this mighty move of the Spirit needs to translate into something. We've been teaching people about faith, teaching people about what God can do. Why can't He change the country? In fact, then the generation after ours, they have social media. They actually have taken the conversation onto social media. If you dare say, in Nigeria, if you dare say on social media, this country needs prayer, they will come after you. All the prayers that you guys have been praying for 40 years, where is the result? Leave the prayer team, my friend, and solve problems. And then they will be giving you examples of other countries, other so on. If you say they should pay tithe, they say leave it. Does Elon Musk pay tithe? What are you talking about? And you are saying that you have to pay tithe to do prosperity. So they are more exposed. They're daring to ask questions. We did not have social media. The only place where we went to have our conversations was in the church. If you disturb the pastor too much, an usher will carry you out. But these guys, they can hide behind their phones and throw the questions at you, not privately, but globally. So I think it was a matter of...
Are they driven by a genuine desire to do right, or they just want to court popularity? Because, young people are very attention-seeking. We've all been young before. You want the limelight on you, and the way you do it is attack or hit an older person and try to bring down a giant. So sometimes you wonder, is it a real desire for conversation, for dialogue, or is just point scoring, cheap point scoring? And we can do it in many ways. So what is going on there?
First, of course, was the genuine fact that they were not heard. Yeah, they did not have that opportunity.
I said, stand here so I can see you, because I was looking for where you were. Yes.
So the first problem was actually that there was no means of expression.
Yeah.
There is the culture, first, of... When I was very young, my dad would put on his shirt and short. He loved to play lawn tennis, white. And then he would get on his bike and drive with his racket. And then I would say to him, take me along. He would say, okay, I'll come back for you. And then he would go. One of those days, he said it again. I said, you are lying. I just saw my mom's hand coming in my direction to whack my face. Mm-hmm. I ran away. She said, you don't say that an elder is telling lies. Mm-hmm. So I learned that as a child. So I find out that even as adults, our people sometimes are unable to express their opinions.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first thing that makes them to go out there, because now they've found an opportunity to talk without confronting you face to face. However...
So, I don't want to hold you there, but we have just 11 minutes.
Right.
And we want to take some of the questions coming from here.
Right.
So can... Yes. Oh, it's very easy. We are not the first to do it. The church did it in the book of Acts. They did it in the various church councils, Nicaea, Constantinople, Ephesus. You know, the church has a pattern of doing it. And even within the various churches, they develop confessions, creeds. You know, they just formalize the belief system. It doesn't take place in just sitting down one day. You have to work through all the nuances and the differences and all of that and craft a position that covers everybody and everybody sticks with it, you know. So, for example, we have a huge issue about the prophetic ministry. I mean, if we leave it unattended, it's going to damage all of us. So there has to be a certain convergence to craft a clear message that all of us can work with. And then you have a standardized belief system that you can work with. And apart from that, a lot of Christian beliefs have already been defined. In our church, we say what people call Apostles' Creed. We call it Christian Creed. And we say it once every month. The whole church says the creed because Christianity is a creedal faith. It's a faith based on a creed. So that is there. There are different creeds. There are different confessions that we can go back to look at and work with and be conscious about adhering to it. Not just what the pastor puts out as his faith, because Christianity is historical. It's not individual. It's historical and it's transgenerational. So there are already, the forms are there. We can always work with them.
Thank you very much. Let me go to Dr. Chand with a question from Amidou. What do you do when you serve under a leader who in a transition period is stuck at the I do, you watch stage?
He says, what do you do with a leader in your raising of leaders? I do, you watch. We do it together. You do, I watch. I'm out. He says, what do you do with a leader who is stuck with I do, you watch and doesn't go beyond that?
Well, they may not be the leader. That may be disqualifying, self-disqualifying. Because it's a journey. If somebody stops at step number 2, they're not bad people, they are going to heaven people, but they're not future people. And so I think our churches have so many people who Jesus loves, and I think they'll make it to heaven, but on planet Earth, they're useless. And I think we as pastors feel like everybody can rise. If I could just teach them this, they would rise. And that is not true. Some people are just not going to do it, not going to understand it. Their belief system is going to limit them to where we are. So if somebody stops in the middle of the journey, I pray for them and move on because there are others waiting as well.
Thank you very much. Let me go to Dr. Adeyemi. Sylvia on Facebook is asking, how can a church intentionally make room for the young people in their leadership structure?
Thank you. I look back today and I have tremendous respect for my first pastor, my previous pastor, when I think about the fact that it was some 36 years ago that he appointed me youth pastor in our church. I was just out of college. And there was no youth fellowship, right? There was no fellowship. I was appointed, and then I formed the fellowship. I love the challenge because I had to call a few people together and sold them a vision about the fellowship, and then got permission from my pastor to ask all the young people in church to stay back after a service, sold them all a vision, and I was able to mobilize them. We raided the university campuses and polytechnics and environment. We were able to pull in a lot of young people into the church to the extent that then when our church was to start a branch. Then I was posted to Lagos to pastor a branch at 24. These days, when I started talking, when I was noticing the dissonance in our church, and I began to say, we need to bring our young people up. We need to create room for them. I felt some resistance. And I said, you know what? Nobody can convince me that young people can't lead. Because I said, and my experience was 30-something years ago. And these ones, with all the tools, all the information at their disposal, they're capable of doing a lot of things. So I would say it's still the leadership business. When you want to create any change, you need to sell the vision to the whole church. You need to show why, show the benefits, and so on. And then take the young people through the process. Create internship opportunities, right? In other words, you need to bring some of those young people in, maybe during their vacation from school or so. Let them come and serve in the system. Let them serve with the older people. Let them have a taste of what it's like. Then they can make their decisions, right, with time. They are definitely, we said it earlier on, you need to create their own groups for them. Independent groups, so that they can freely express themselves and their talents and their gifts. And then you need to be intentional about church events, church services, and then the special events, intentional about featuring them. They've got to try. They've got to make their own mistakes. I'm grateful for the first opportunity to teach. It was at a midweek service. My pastor happened to be someone who had a gift for memorizing things. So we thought that was the standard way to preach a sermon. You just read your opening scripture, close the Bible, and then you are speaking and you are quoting scriptures till the end. I wrote down the scriptures I was to use and was cramming them. I crammed and crammed and crammed, and then I got into the service. 10 minutes into my message, my system jammed. Then I was going around. I was embarrassed, right? It took time before I realized his own is not the normal one. Writing it down and looking at your notes, that's normal. But I'm grateful that I had the opportunity. I made my mistake. I was able to correct myself. So we've got to create the opportunities. We've got to allow them. We've got to sell the vision, because sometimes older people feel threatened. Like, oh, if somebody else knows how to do what I'm doing, it means I'm going to be out of my job. No, we need to then give them a slight mindset shift. One of my mentors told me something that I also repeat to people. You cannot be a star player forever. You can't, however good you are, age will catch up with you. They will stop you from playing. And then he said, if you are not careful, the stadia where people paid to watch you play, you will have to pay to enter those stadia in the future. The only way to prevent that is to become a coach.
Amen. That's good. Thank you very much. We have 2 minutes more. Any question else, or we just summarize?
I think we'll leave it for you.
Well, thank you to the panelists. Pastor Sam, thank you for sharing your heart, your experiences, your knowledge, and your person with us. It's just been a rewarding time, just being with you, talking, listening. First Samuel, thank you so much for sharing your heart. It's good to just not hear people talk, but also to listen to the processes of their mind as they are attempting to answer a question and reflect on something. The Christian life is a life of faith. It's also a life of the spirit, and it's a life of the intellect. The Christian faith must make sense. It must have spiritual impact. but it must make sense. We cannot say we believe in something, but it is so ridiculous that we ourselves cannot defend it or explain it. And one of the things we have to understand as pastors, that we are inheritors of the oldest belief system in a continuous sense, an oldest written belief system on the earth. There is nothing like that. There is no belief system written and documented, verified for the thousands of years of the Judeo-Christian faith. That is our heritage. Our Christian faith did not start with Pastor Otabil and his books, or Pastor Sam Chan and his books, or Pastor Ademi and his books, or Pastor Adeboye and his books, or anybody and their books. The Christian faith goes way beyond all of us. And we have to always reflect about the historicity of the Christian faith. This is a historical faith. And it's not just about your breakthrough and what God is doing in your life, because we tend to always see things from a personal point of view as it benefits us. And that is the charismatic strength and the weakness. Sometimes you learn something not because it has a direct benefit to you, but it helps you to understand yourself in a way better way form. So it's like taking your children on an excursion to go and see maybe the castles at Elmina and Cape Coast, or going to the Independence Square, or going to Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum. You say, oh, this is Kwame Nkrumah. The child doesn't see any benefit. What's the benefit of all of these? Who is Kwame Nkrumah? Will it give me food to eat? What about these slave dungeons that happened 500, 600 years ago? What use is that to me? But it all helps the child as they grow to have a better self-awareness and become a better person. And that's what our Christian faith is. We are charismatics, but you have to understand the Protestants. You have to understand all the arguments that have gone on for 2,000 years of our faith. When they met in Chalcedon, what were they talking about? What were they talking about in Nicaea? What were the pros and what were the cons? What was the debate? And church members may not know that, but pastors must know this, because it helps you when you are speaking to know whether you are going off course or you are on course. And just let us treasure the historicity of our faith, learn more about it, learn the doctrines of our faith, learn to preach within the doctrines of our faith, so that we can pass on something to our children, which is not just Facebook and Instagram, which will pass away, but something that has endured for the thousands of years, that will never pass away. Each generation of Christians must believe the fundamental faith of the Christian. I believe the same thing Paul believed. Can you imagine people who lived 2,000 years ago? I share community with them because I believe the same thing they believe. People who lived for so many years before my great ancestors were born, I share common faith with them because what they believed has been passed on faithfully for me to also believe the same thing. Christianity is transgenerational, and our faith doesn't move with fashion. Our faith is constant. Times and seasons will change, methods will change, but the core and the center of our faith has traveled for thousands of years. And there is no institution on earth that has that legacy as we do. Let us treasure it. God bless you. Thank you so much.
How many of you have appreciated Doulos 2025? This is the best Doulos you're going to ever have. Because next year, you will have a point of comparison. But since this has never happened, this is the best you've ever been at.
Right.
So you can tell everybody I went to the best doulas. And we would not be here today had it not been for this man and his vision. Will you join me in honoring the one who brought us all together? Thank you.
Thank you so much. God bless you. And we will go